Why did they?
Fly and study in the airplane. Why?
Because they wanted a higher education.
Oh no.
I love it.
No.
Corny, but it gets there, right?
It does. That was good.
I
That
know
part.
Mr. Klein told me before I need help with my jokes, but I've always had dry humor. I crack myself up. That's all that matters. See?
Mr. Santiago, why don't you go ahead and make us live? And when we are live, please let us know.
We're live.
We are? Okay, great. Mr. Hilton, whenever you are ready.
All right. I'll start off by asking for the Facilities Committee meeting if there's any public comment just related to facilities. We'll take public comment for budget before we have the Finance Committee meeting. But just public comment for facilities. Do we have any of that?
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
Okay, fine. I'm just flipping around. Do I see Mr. Willauer? Ah, there he is. Okay, so we all received a letter from Mrs. Lawrence asking a question. If you could flip that up a little bit, the agenda up a little bit, yeah. From Mrs. Lawrence requesting about where are we with the facilities. So as you may recall, we are going to be putting chillers in at the middle school this summer. And then in 2026, we're putting in a hot water heater at the middle school. And one of the many roofs at the high school is going to be replaced. But now regarding the facilities itself, we had a very voluminous study done by EI Architects, which we discussed on July 18th of last summer in a board workshop. That was 186 pages to digest. And then we had an update in a PowerPoint from Bruce Chrisman of EI Architects in September. And then we had another one in November. And then we had another one on February 13th of 2025. And if we could put page 6 from that up on the screen. Okay, so after all this writing, here's down to the nitty gritty about the option comparisons. And option number 1 is if we keep the administration building, and if we replace the HVAC system, and if we put in new windows, and if we replace the slanted roof where the green shingles are, the flat roof is fairly new, that's a little less than $3 million. And Mr. Willauer has confirmed that we can put the ductwork for that above the ceiling. There's room in the rafters where the slanted roof is to put that all in. And he thinks that that might even be a little less than 3 million. Of course, he's on here. If he wants to jump in anytime, feel free. So that's that option of maintaining the administration building. Then Edgewood has the original HVAC system going back to 1969, and it's somewhat miraculously still working, but we can't count on that to keep happening. So if we replace the HVAC system at Edgewood, which we can do by putting the ductwork in the ceiling, there's room to get it in the ceiling, and then if we replace the windows, and if we replace the roof, that's $6.6 million. So that's a total of $9.5 million. And if we're just replacing things, the roof and the HVAC system and so forth, we don't get into code issues because we're not moving walls around, all that stuff. So that saves us a lot of grief. Regarding Edgewood, if we're putting in the HVAC ductwork and so forth and ceiling, it doesn't matter later on if we want to move the walls around. That's not going to affect the system. It's just moving a couple of vents in the ceiling. So whatever we eventually decide to do with Edgewood, if we put the HVAC system in the ceiling, it doesn't matter. Then the other question, which had been discussed, is do we want to use a conventional gas-fired HVAC system with a unit on the roof, or do we want to drill down in the parking lot and use geothermal? So for what we're talking about right now, it doesn't really matter. That can be decided later on because all the ductwork and so forth is going to be exactly the same. So that's as you can see on here, and I've emailed this page, this latest to all of you, although we all had it in February. So that's the least expensive option. Then option 2A, you can see if we closed the administration building and moved it to Edgewood, that's $11 million, but it doesn't answer, well, what are we going to do with the kids that are Edgewood right now and the 3 classrooms that we're hoping to rent out to the MCIU? So doesn't seem like a great option. Then option 2B, which is to close the administration building and move it to the high school, that's $28 million. This is from EI Architects. Not very practical. Then there is option 3, replace the current district administration office and build a new one on the site, tear it down and build a new one, and that's $6.5 million, and it would be a lot smaller than what we have now. And then the last option would be to move the district administration offices to Edgewood, and then to expand Edgewood to have whatever facilities programs we want to do, and that's $13.5 million. So clearly the cheapest option is to keep what we have. Mr. Willauer, once again, jump in anytime, Dan. Mr. Willauer is concerned about the lifespan of these 2 systems at the administration building and at Edgewood. And what he would like to do is have permission from this board to start doing the engineering work, the specifications for replacing all this stuff that we've talked about, not actually doing it, but getting it all ready so that if this board decides to go ahead, we can do it maybe as early as the summer of 2026, rather than waiting for something to break, which could be problematic. As I said, Mr. Willauer is here. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, my hand's raised. I am wondering, I'm looking at option 2A and option 4. 2A, Mr. Hilton, you mentioned that if we move the administration offices to Edgewood, we don't have anywhere for the students to go, or what happens with the students. I guess I'd like to hear from administration a little bit more about what does it look like to do that? Like, are there still classrooms for students there? And I'd like to tagging on to that here a little bit more about the difference between option 2A and option 4. How much would the expansion be if we would go that route? And how much would we be adding to our capacity?
Well, Mr. Rodriguez is here.
Yep, I'm here. I'll tell you what, how about I'll start and anybody else can either correct or add or edit to my comments. So with regard to option 2A, it's simple. Now, as I think board members know, but just to refresh everyone's memory, the programming that we currently have over at Edgewood, we're looking at taking in 3 classrooms from the MCIU. So Edgewood was our smallest elementary school. So we've got 3 classrooms there. We have about 50 students. Our hope is to continue to add services to probably get up to 80 students. Now, 80 still isn't a lot, but they are some of our most needy students. So they're going to take up a little bit more room than would be required, or rather than would be typical or normal for a regular education student. So we did count the classrooms. I don't remember right now. But you know, there's definitely a decent numbers. So I think the issue would be if we're taking our personnel and staff, which just as a reminder, we house about 40 plus at our current Beach Street facility. And I'll call it that just for purposes of everybody knowing what I'm talking about at the location. So in terms of overall square feet, we're looking at 30,000 square feet at the Beach Street District Office Building. We don't need that much. I mean, of course, it's always nice to have, but every square foot you have means extra heating, extra air conditioning, other things that can go wrong, etc. So we could definitely go with less square footage. Um, but we can't go down to a couple of classrooms. We would definitely be taking a fairly large footprint out of Edgewood, and that's assuming that we use, maybe a little bit more than cubicle space, because just like most other operations, some of the work that we are doing, I mean, all you got to do is think about the different departments that are over there, the payroll department, the personnel department, the receiving department. We have to have secure spaces. We have to have spaces where private personnel conversations can take place, etc. So I'd have to talk to Bruce to refresh my memory on the exact square footage. But I'm not gonna lie, it would be a lot. So that is that and I think that kind of leads into the cost for option 2B. I mean, we'd be breaking ground if we went to the high school. And even though there's some advantages there, perhaps long term, there's no question it's a huge upfront
Right.
cost.
Which is why you have option 4 in there, I assume.
Yeah, option 4 would be you're taking into account the fact that the district office personnel are going to need more. They're going to need more space. And as much as we'd like to outfit, what's already there, and Maureen and I asked some very interesting questions that I won't ask publicly, but we stretched the limits of architectural imagination. And while they were, I think, very, very inventive and might have led what we thought and hoped was that it would lead to an overall less cost. It was actually more cost. So and I think I'll just take the mystery out of it. What we were proposing is where that kind of middle section where we have the garden and kind of like that outside space. And if you've been in Edgewood, you know that the hallway kind of goes around this square, and the square contains a little inner garden and place where kids can go out there. We said, well, what if we kind of build a little tower right there for our staff, and Bruce and the gang put together some figures and just said, listen, you think that this is going to be easy, but you're talking about developing a structure within a structure. It's actually going to be extraordinarily more expensive
Mhm.
if you just, bounce out a wall and add to the place.
Yeah.
So I'll pause here. Maureen or Dan, anything that I missed?
I think you covered it.
Yeah, nothing on my end. Also, really good.
So really, option 2A isn't really an option in the sense that we would have a new problem to deal with because we'd be losing classrooms that we currently need / are using.
Very likely, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I think what I'll do is just pause here to say, as board members and members of the community who follow along, um, we know that we need to be looking at these options. You'll notice that neither Maureen nor I have come out with some level of, strong recommendation, because this is a complicated situation. You have buildings at different levels, and obviously every time we stick a shovel in the ground, we know it costs more. However, we also know that one of the big issues within the budget is the HVAC and the heating, the air conditioning, and those costs. So as we think about how we spend smarter, we definitely have to think, okay, if we're going to get a new HVAC system, then we need to take care of the windows. And by the way, I believe that's all inclusive of the cost, but we need to do it all. Otherwise, we're getting a new system just to blow the heat out the windows. And the windows in the Beach Street facility are very old, far older than me.
Yeah, so all those things are included in option A, the roof, the windows, and the HVAC system. And I'll just point out again, which I did mention before, if you get into moving the administration building into Edgewood, expanding, now we're getting into codes. Now the codes office is going to come in and they're going to have all kinds of things they want us to do. I'm just speaking from experience. I mean, we just had that with the playgrounds, getting codes in with the middle school and the Edgewood playground. But if we're just replacing the systems, it's not a code issue. Everything's good. So considering that we have some major budget decisions that we're going to be talking about for a while, and in my conversation with Dan of the concern of getting this underway so that if something that we can get there before something breaks. I'm merely asking this board to authorize Dan to go ahead and do the early engineering work so that he has everything he needs if we want to bid out one or both of these projects at some time in the future. And then, of course, we'll have a much better idea of how much it's going to cost. So can I get a consensus from this board to authorize this next week?
I think Mr. Klein has something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Klein, your picture isn't up on my screen. I don't know why, but go ahead.
Not a problem. I'm going to be brutally honest here. In February, we were presented with a $9 million shortfall that was a surprise to all the board members. I think I can speak for all of us on that. As we sit here tonight, we're still wondering about the last $5 million. I don't feel prepared to do this tonight. I don't feel comfortable doing this tonight. The decisions we have ahead of us tonight and the next 2 weeks to come up with a preliminary budget are huge decisions. And I'm honestly just not capable of processing this yet. So I'd like to table this until our June meeting. But that's everybody, it's up to everybody else, I understand. And I just wanted to share my feelings.
Okay, I'm not hearing anybody say anything. So,
Mrs. Bearden.
I think- oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I usually try to wait if I have something to say until the rest of the board speaks. As I've mentioned before, several times about any work that we perform in the administration building, when we're talking about removing windows and things like that. It's one thing to change HVAC unit, but any work obviously that could cause opening of the building or any other area of the building where asbestos would be there, we'd be looking at asbestos abatement issues. And so while I recognize that that's something we have to contend with, I recognize that things need to be considered more proactively, as Mr. Hilton and Mr. Willhauer have mentioned. We don't want to be behind the wheel and having to expend high costs and value than we're ready for, because that is always going to be more expensive. And we could just pretty much look to say that would be change orders in relation to asbestos. Just saying that we should, matter of factly, think of that when we're looking at any change to the admin building. outside of obvious, like moving furniture, equipment and things like that. But I'm in agreement that while we could say, yeah, Mr. Willhauer can prepare something to be underway, my thoughts are on the budget right now. And so I'd like to see us tap into that first before we make more decisions that we could make after we effectively pass a budget.
Mr. Heidel.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I had said on previous occasions as well too, is that we're talking about putting millions of dollars into buildings that are 1969 earlier. There's a lot of real estate in Pottstown. I'm not saying we go out and buy real estate, but certainly we could look at leasing. There may be good deals out there. Move the administration building and not be worried about the next breakdown of equipment or upgrade to windows or roofs. It's just out there. It's something that I think maybe we could look at. Might be cost effective in the near term as well too. Just something I would ask the board to consider.
Mr. Armato.
Yes, thank you. I think I will have to express the same concerns that our president, Madam Bearden, and Mr. Klein expressed, and that is we're looking at trying to deal with a $9 million deficit in our budget. And I would really prefer not to be thinking about these other things right now. I understand the concern of the what if happens if tomorrow the heating system fails or the air conditioning system fails. I understand those concerns, but I would suggest that we have much more immediate things to put our attention to, and I would prefer to do that.
Okay, well, I do believe I have answered Mrs. Lawrence's question in her email about what the options are. It appears to be the sentiment of the board to table this, so I will, excuse me, Ms. Spence.
Thank you. I have a question. Where are the funds coming from for this project? Are these ESSER funds?
Well, yes, we're beyond ESSER funds. There's no ESSER funds left. Maureen, you can correct me, but I don't think there's any ESSER.
No,
money.
you're correct, Tom. If we were to move forward, we have some money in capital reserve. At this point, that would be my recommendation, is to look to the capital reserve fund.
How much do we have in capital reserves?
About 9 million that's committed or assigned for capital projects.
Okay. And is the AC for, or well, obviously the building will be in use part of the summer. And if the AC goes or if the heater goes before this decision is made, that's where we go and use those funds for repair?
We could. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, just looking at all the little boxes here. If there's nothing further, I will declare this meeting adjourned. And then we will move into finance. And is there any public comment regarding finance before we get into that meeting?
Not at this time, Mr. Hilton.
All right, well, it says here, answers to requested information, and I believe that's either Mrs. Oakley or Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hilton. So first item on the agenda is, yes, answers to requested information. We got a lot of different requests for information from board members, and I did my best to include what I could in the budget presentation. And as we move through that presentation, if there are additional questions, I mean, Stephen and I are happy, and Matt's here tonight too to join us to take those questions. with your permission, Mr. Hilton, I'm happy to move right on into our budget work session.
Please do.
Okay, and I'll just ask that maybe I could go through the entire presentation and then I'll happily bring it back up from the beginning and then we can go through with some dialogue if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here we are, May 8th, at our Finance Committee meeting, and we're going to hopefully make this a productive working session tonight and make some progress on this budget. This is just an outline of where we started. Back in September, the Act 1 index is released. We took action in November to opt out of raising above our adjusted index, which was 5.8. We started presenting the budget in February, and now here we are in May tonight with hopefully as much information as we need to go through kind of line by line and ask the questions that are needed and get some direction. So just a breakdown of our revenues by source. So we have local, state, and federal revenues, and that is the total, about 35 million from local revenue, 48 million from the state, and about 3.5 million federal revenue. So our actual collections of our local real estate tax make up the bulk of our local revenues. And here are our historical actual tax collections back to 2015. Now looking at our total local revenues, we have a little bit over $35 million. And as you can see, the majority of that comes from our local real estate tax. We also have per capita and occupation tax, earned income tax, occupational millage tax, real estate transfer tax, and then we have our delinquent taxes. We have interest on our investments, and then some of our IDEA funds are also considered local revenue, and then miscellaneous revenues as well as rentals. So historically, we have not increased our millage. We did 2 times in the past 10 years. This budget deficit could be covered by increasing taxes up to the index, and we can move through as to what that would actually generate for us in terms of revenue. Our tax base has declined in the past 10 years. It remains pretty consistent, right about $760 million, and has since we lost a hospital in 2018. So the revenue that could be generated from a tax increase, if we were looking to go to the full adjusted index, it would generate about $1.7.5 million. So looking at that on a per homestead allocation, what would that look like to the average property owner? The average assessed value of properties in Pottstown is about $79,000. And at our current real estate millage, it would generate a tax bill of about $3,300. The new, if we increase to the index of 5.8%, the new tax bill would be about $3,500. So it's $192 increase to the average homestead. This year, we did get additional gaming revenue that comes through from the state, and that in turn goes out back to the homesteads who are qualified homestead farmsteads. And this year's credit to the tax bill would be $777. So the increase from last year's credit to this year's credit is about $106. So the real field tax increase per the average homestead would be about $85. So again, just looking at that homestead farmstead dollar amount, it has increased over the last 2 years, which is nice because that does turn into a credit for our approved homesteads. And right now that reduction is $777 based on the number of parcels that we have. And the reduction in assessed value would be determined once we determine our millage. So just to look back at inflation and what that looks like, I mean, we've talked about that a lot through this budget, and just the fact that we have seen compounded inflation over the past few years, and then just regular costs. Like we used to be able to estimate 3-4% for increases, and we've seen increases on different line items in this budget up exceeding 20-some%, and that's just a 1-year increase. So that's a lot to make up in 1 year, especially when you're looking at like the Act 1 increase is only 5.8%, and then you have 20% increases on certain line items. It's just a hard balance to try to put together, hence why we're in our deficit position. Looking at the countywide assessment, again, we talked about this a little bit, and the fact that we haven't had a countywide assessment since 1996, and there is no plan to do one at this time in Montgomery County. So our state revenues are a little over $47 million, and the way that they break down, the majority of that is our basic ed subsidy. We also get special ed subsidy, which again, $3.6 million doesn't nearly cover a fraction of the cost of what our actual special ed costs are. We have a pre-K counts allocation in there, as well as our Ready to Learn funds. That's been an area that the state has focused on. They've put additional monies through that formula. They've put monies through that formula in different categories, such as adequacy and tax equity supplements. So we are obligated to use those funds to offset those two areas. We also have reimbursements on our Social Security and retirement obligations that we have to pay on all of our salaries. So looking back at what the governor proposed back in February, we budgeted about half of the increase. So what came out from the governor's office was that we would receive a little over $21 million, and we have budgeted about $20.5 million. So similarly with the Ready to Learn funds, the proposal's about $6.9 million, and we've budgeted about $5.9 million. So while we're hopeful that we will see that full allocation, we don't know where the governor's budget's going to land. We've been advised to not budget the full 100% allocation because that doesn't look very probable. On the special ed subsidy, as you can see here, the first line item is what our subsidy has been back the last few years, and then what our actual special ed expenditures have been. And as you can see, they are increasing, at a high pace. Things are just more expensive. Post-COVID, we've had more need, so that's the reason why the special ed costs are up. Our federal revenues, we have in the budget about $3.6 million. As we know, this is a topic, an area of concern. Where is the federal government going to end with Department of Education cuts? The last kind of information that we got was that Title I was going to remain untouched, which is positive for us because we use those funds heavily to offset a lot of educational salaries and different interventions that are in our budget. The 21st Century program, the other grants, which is the Gear Up program, those areas, if they were to go away, the costs that are married to that revenue would also go away. So that puts us kind of in a neutral position. And then we have our medical access funding, which I haven't heard anything as far as the medical access. That's really controlled at the state level. And it's been poor as far as return on our dollar. We don't get dollar for dollar, which would be nice, but the program has kind of remained unchanged in the last 10 years. So moving into the expenditures, looking at the total budget by object. So if we go right down, starting with salaries, a little bit over 33 million, almost $34 million, benefits, almost $22 million. Again, that makes up the huge bulk of the budget. But following behind that are professional services, which will move into a bit of a deeper dive, property services, which are plant and maintenance services, Other services, which include our pass-through tuitions to charter schools, our special ed tuitions for out-of-district students, and transportation. So that is really an object that's just also increased due to the additional costs that transportation has been over the last few years, the additional need that's been there. Supplies, $4.6 million, equipment, $1.4 million, and other services, $4.5 million. And those include our debt payment services, our pass-through pre-K counts funds. So a lot of these areas are kind of, I'll call them untouchable because they're just obligations that we have, like debt service, where we constantly monitor and look at our financial picture to see if there's any, ability to get any savings. We did a number of bond refinances, I would say probably 4 years ago at this point, and we locked in at some pretty good rates. So that's why we haven't had any, the interest rates are up. So there really isn't any ability to do any more refinancing at this point. So moving right on into salaries, here is a breakdown of how those salaries are spread across all of our different areas. Similarly with benefits, our healthcare, our Social Security, and our retirement are all in here, as well as our other employment benefits. Professional services, again, this was an area that we've seen drastic increases, and the majority of that is due to some of our special education costs. So what are our professional education services? This is the category that you'll see listed as 320. So any expenditure that hits a 320 count code is going to be included in here. So a breakdown of those services include all kind of professional services. So you have like your sub services, you have your Gear Up, which is a grant funded. All of our Gear Up counselors are funded through this line item. We have all of our special ed cost plans. So the MCIU, CCIU, BCIU. We have all of our partial hospitalization and behavioral educational services would come through this line item. Pass-through funds for federal programs such as Title I. We have pre-K. Some of our sub-costs for pre-K would go into this line item, as well as our data management contracts that we have with the MCIU, all of our social workers, and additional services that we would need for Gear Up. Support staff, these next 4 line items are professional development costs that we have for support staff, administration, pupil health, the business office. Some examples of like what would go into the business office would be like our board docs. So we pay PSBA and board docs for their services, and that's what's included in this line item. We also outsource our transportation. So we have data management that's coded to support for transportation, as well as the professional services, the administrative work that is done for a transportation department. And then we have some of our professional IT services are coded here as well. So I know that was one of the questions we had, exactly what goes into this bucket. And those are the kinds of things that go into the professional ed services. Then we have other professional services as well. So some of these costs include more costs for Gear Up, which again is a grant funded line item. Then we have some of our nurses, OTs, PTs, our legal fees, therapy source, psych services, assessment appeals, more nurse subs. We have the audit that we have done annually by Herbine, and some other Act 80 automation services. We have some bond sinking fees that get coded in here, as well as some professional services. And then for student activity, we have different services for the marching band and the color guard that are coded here, as well as ambulance for events. And then we have community services, which are funded through Title I. So moving into the 400, I just tried to dive a little deeper into the areas that certain board members had questions. So again, I will re-go through this presentation and give you guys the ability to ask questions as well. So thank you for your patience. The 400 category is all of our property services, buildings and grounds, maintenance, repairs, some construction fees go in here as well. The 500s, as I mentioned, transportation is a big one, as well as our tuition. This really makes up the bulk of all of the 500 services, which is a hefty line item in our budget. And if we look at the transportation costs, I know we went through this a little bit, but we have contracted transportation through the MCIU. And this is just an example of what it costs to transport just this limited number of students. It's over $500,000. It's extremely expensive. These students have extremely high need, and they typically are going quite a distance. Some are going cross county into Philadelphia County, etc. Early intervention. This is an area that we absorb a cost, but we don't receive any revenue from the state. It's just, these are our kids. These are preschool aged kids, so pre 5 years old. If they have an identified need before they become 5 years old, the MCIU provides services through their early intervention plan, and we get the cost for transportation. So this is the early intervention costs for the school year. So again, definitely more students that are being transported, but some of them aren't going as far. And that's still a pretty hefty bill, over $400,000. So part of the hope of bringing back 3 of these early intervention classrooms from the IU was to bring our kids back into our district boundaries so that we don't have to transport them. Even when they're going to West Pottsgrove, it's still expensive. The closer we can keep our kids, the better we'll be with kind of controlling these transportation costs. So early intervention also has a summer program. Again, this was last year's actual cost, but we paid about $50,000 in transportation just for the 1 month early intervention summer program that our kids participated in. So what does our transportation budget look like for this year? So we're looking at almost $900,000 to the IU, about a little less than $3 million to CMD, which is our main contractor, and the other costs about $175,000. And the other costs consist of if we pay another school district, sometimes we'll split transportation with another school district. If we have McKinney-Vento eligible kids, they need to be transported to their school that they of attendance. So that could mean that we're going to Exton and Reading and Warminster. So sometimes we're not able to make that run that we're obligated to do because we just don't have the staff to do it. And we have to pay another school district our portion to do that. So this year's budget, we are looking at about $3.9 million in transportation costs. So tuitions, again, this is an area that has just climbed tremendously in the past few years. We have regular ed tuitions, special ed tuitions, and alternate ed tuitions. These cost the $10.9 million budget for 25-26. That does include the charter tuitions as well. Right now, we have about 321 charter students. Last year, on average, we had 304 students. So those extra 15 students on an estimated cost is about $300,000 in additional expense that we have to absorb for those charter school students. Moving into supplies, we have general supplies. Our energy also falls under the 600 category, books and technology. So our energy costs, this is an area that we saw a 21% increase over the last year, or we're anticipating a 21% increase. Again, just something to keep your eyes on. This is why we brought some of the options that we did through the EI feasibility study to just be mindful of this, because where these costs are going, we want to make sure that we are controlling them as best as possible. If we have a way to mitigate some of these costs by doing greener initiatives, which we know cost money on the front end, we really have to weigh out that benefit to see if that's worth our front end dollars to make sure we're controlling them in the long run, because they're going up. There's nothing out there that's telling us they're going to come back down at any point in the near future. Our 700 category is our equipment and some of our infrastructure. Moving into the 800s and the 900s, this is our bond interest and principal payments, as well as our pass-through funds for pre-K counts. So we do have partners in our pre-K counts program, and we are the host of that program. So the funds get sent to us, and then they get sent to the partners based on, their monthly reports, and making sure we have the compliance oversight at the partner sites. So as long as they're doing what they need to do, that, we ensure that it follows the grant guidelines, we then pass the funds through to them. Our debt service. So this is a breakdown of our debt service. Currently, we are structured for 10 more years of debt service payments, and our total that we have to pay is about $40 million, and that includes this year. So we'd have to back out this year. So we'll be less moving into the 25-26 year. We'll be less than $40 million, probably a little bit over $37 million in total debt service. So as you can see, this breaks down the bond payments by series of bond. So we issued bonds in 2018, 2019, 2 times, 2020 and 2021. And these were actually all refi bonds because we did not do any projects since 2018. So these were all refinance projects or refinance debt that we wrapped into a new bond, issued new debt, got a better interest rate, got savings, and were able to take advantage of that. So our total debt service in our budget is about $3.7 million, which is about 4% of our total budget. Special education. So now just moving into special education costs. We have, as you can see, the increase from 22-23 to 23-24, 24-25. In this 300 line item, that's those professional services. So that's all of those IU cost plans that we saw when we looked at the 320 category. In the 500s, that's our tuition and our transportation costs. Actually, transportation costs aren't in the 1200 function because they're in a different function, but this is just tuition costs. So all of our tuitions that we have for special ed are in that 500. And as you can see, that's 5.6 to 6.7, and now we're looking at 7.2. So this is the area that has really just outpaced us as far as additional state revenues, and just really exceeded all of the typical 3% a year that we've seen in the past. So looking at the 1200 category, again, we have this early intervention line item. So we do pay for some of not only the transportation that these early intervention age kids receive, but we also pay for the actual services. So in 23-24, we paid $110,000 for early intervention services. Prior to that, we paid $140,000. And then you can see it had reduced a bit, but that was likely due to COVID and, the pause on services. So moving back to our millage and our assessed values, I believe last month I added this slide in here just so we could get an idea. Some of the values of the properties are underassessed in terms of what their county assessed value is, and then their sales price. So we looked at a few properties that sold recently and what the county assessment was, and then the actual market value, what that calculates when you look at the common level ratio, which is taking the assessed value and then bringing that to a market value and then comparing that to what the sales price is. So we can see that we are underassessed in a lot of our recent sales, and the tax revenue that could be generated from that additional assessment, could be hundreds of dollars per property. Now, not all properties are underassessed, but this again just speaks to not having that countywide reassessment and what that looks like in terms of, property by property. So back in February, we had revenues a little over 87 million, expenses a little over 96 million, and we were looking at a $9 million shortfall. We projected our state revenues at 50% of the governor's proposal. We did not put any PA property tax rebate program in. We assumed healthcare insurance increases at 4%. Charter and special ed tuitions were projected based on the actuals that we've seen over the past few years. We didn't increase any federal funding, and that budget had no change to staff or programming. Then we took another look in March, and we made a few recommendations, and we were able to bring the budget shortfall down to $6.1 million. We updated some of the pass-through amounts, the transportation subsidy amounts, workers' comp expense, and we had a number of administrative recommendations that were aimed to reduce impact on programs. Then in April, we took a look again, and we were able to reduce the budget shortfall down to about $5 million. For illustrative purposes, what the extra revenue would look like if we went with a tax increase to the full index, and then the revised budget shortfall, which would be a little over $3.3 million. And then the question is, do we want to use fund balance? How much fund balance are we going to use to balance this budget? So our third look had more proposed changes and efficiencies, and we worked through those. We have those included in here. We have a list of what those proposals are and the action that would be for each position that would be affected. And again, we can move through this a little bit more when we get to the Q&A section. I'll try to just cover it as fast as I can. The non-personnel items that we had some reduction in Power School programming, CPI training. We talked a little bit about bringing back those 3 Edgewood classrooms. We reduced some Zoom licenses. We pushed off smartboard replacements till next year. We paused our professional development for cultural competency, and we've made an adjustment to the support staff calendar from 193 days to 187 days. So in looking at, and again, Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Boyer are both here, so if you guys need to jump in at any point, please feel free to do so. But in looking at our music reduction, we were looking at going from 7 full-time teachers to 6 full-time teachers. And I know there was a lot of questions and concerns about what that would look like and what would actually be cut out of the music program. And the answer is nothing. We can still deliver the current music instruction that's being provided with 7 teachers, and we can do it with 6 teachers. And we actually can do it with still a little bit of additional time in schedules. So we would need to do some scheduling adjustments. Right now we have some of those staff cover just say in an intervention. They wouldn't do that. They would be 100% focused on music instruction to make sure that we are delivering the current music program the way that we're delivering it today. So moving through the math and English schedule, again, this is just a layout of what we would be doing to make sure that we have everything covered. The proposed budget does not contain Title I funds to sustain extra positions, so we would reallocate those positions and move back to co-teaching in math, with as many sections having 2 teachers, one of them being special ed assigned to the course. The current class sizes are being built out in that master schedule right now. So again, just some more information on what that math would look like at the high school. When it comes to the counselors, we would have a total of 3 at the high school. We also have our Gear Up team at the high school. At the middle school, we would have 4 counselors. We have another contracted special ed group counselor. At the elementary level, we would have 3, and we would work in a 3 to 4 day rotation to make sure that all buildings would be covered. At Edgewood, we would not have a counselor, but we already have a social worker at Edgewood to serve those students, and additional staff supports that, you know, have to do with mental health. We have 7.5 psychs. 2 of those are contracted. We have 2 social workers, 3 board certified behavior analysts, 2 registered behavior technicians, and we would have reallocation of responsibilities, again, just to make sure that these staff members are doing the services that we would, you know, want them to focus on, the mental health services, counseling, etc. I'll move through these next slides pretty quickly. These are just additional considerations that somebody had asked at one point in time. What does athletics look like? What are our total costs for athletics? And this is the breakdown of what that looks like in the athletic budget. And then a breakdown of how those costs are split out amongst the actual co-curricular itself. Again, music, what that looks like in terms of the existing staff that we have and total dollars, because this is a non-mandated program from the state. Similarly with art and what that looks like in terms of total dollars for that department for the salary and benefits. And then a picture of what our fund balance looked like. We talked a lot about fund balance and how much money do we have? What is it reserved for? Can we move it? Can we re-reserve it? And the answer is most likely yes. The capital projects fund, that is pretty locked in, which is $2.4 million. That fund needs to be used for capital projects. And as you know, we have plenty of capital need, and we can draw from that fund as needed for those kinds of repairs. We do have an unassigned fund balance of a little over $6.7 million. Committed for PSERS, $3.1 million. The PSERS rate is projected to continue to climb, not at the rate it's climbed in the past, but it is still expected to climb. So we could use funds from our commitment for PSERS. And then our assignments. These are a little bit more flexible. We do need to assign fund balance because we do have a limit that we must keep our unassigned balance at. So we have funds assigned for capital. We have funds assigned for next year's budget, which is this current year's budget. We have funds assigned for tuition and transportation. As we know, those are areas that we have seen climb. So we would be able to use those funds in those buckets to offset our deficit now or in the future. So looking at projections of what the fund balance would look like if we were to take from it today, and then what would our reserves look like for the next few years. So for this projection, I assumed in the current budget that the tax increase would be at our Act 1 index, which is 5.8. And then the 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29, I assumed an Act 1 increase of 5%. I'm not sure where that Act 1 will fall or land in those next years, but for this illustrative purpose, 5% of additional tax revenue if we were to continue to increase taxes. Expenditures are increased at just a flat 4.5%. So if we used 3.3 million of fund balance to balance this budget and then moved to next year and we raised taxes at 5% and we assumed our expenses would increase 4.5%, we would then need a use of fund balance of 5.8. And if we did the same thing the next year, we would need a use of fund balance of 8.4. And then the following year, we would need a use of fund balance of $11 million. So the last line that you can see, our $24 million fund balance would be reduced to 18, would be reduced to 10, and then we would be in the negative by 28-29 year. This is assuming that all state and federal revenues are flat as well. So if we did the similar exercise and we only increased the Act 1 taxes or revenues with a tax increase at 4%, and if we assumed our expenditure increase at 4.5%, our use of fund balance would be, again, 3.3, 6.1, 9.1, and then 12.1. So as you can see, the fund balance would decrease from 24.4 to 18.2 to 9 million, and then we'd already be in the negative by 27, 28. The Act 1 projections, the IFO puts out projections as to where they think the Act 1 index will be. Now, again, this is just the base index, and this was sourced from PASBO from October of 2024. So they're projecting in 26, 27 that our base index will be 3.6, and then 3.2, and then 3.1. So they are at this point projecting that the Act 1 index will continue to go down and not up. So I wanted to note that. There also was a request to have some budget facts. So we did put together a document that has a lot of the questions that some board members had and some members of the public also had. And that document is going to be available online. This budget presentation has a link in the lower left-hand corner to that document as well. So at the conclusion of tonight's meeting, we'll have this budget presentation also available on our finance page of the website. Again, there was some additional questions about furloughs, and our goal was to recommend similar or lesser positions, full-time positions with benefits, and we had that situation with 5 employees. Our feasibility study that we talked about a little bit earlier in the finance committee, there's a link to that study in this presentation. State mandates, there's also a link to that, and as well as our athletic field study, there's a link to that. And then again, a link to the FAQ documents on this page. So this is the end of the presentation. I will be happy to put that back up, but I'll pause now and I'll turn it back to Mr. Hilton to see how he would like to.
Well, Maureen, I'm actually going to turn it back to you to field the questions.
Sure.
Mrs. Spence has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see. Okay, Mrs. Spence, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. That was really detailed. Great line by line what we had requested, so I appreciate it. And it was delivered really well. My question, I have a few.
Okay.
So one is, I did see a 30K payment in lieu in income in lieu of taxes. Who's paying that 30,000?
So if it was on the expenditure line item,
It was in the income side.
Oh, the income. Okay, so there are a few, it's a municipal agreement. We have, I could get you the name of who pays it, but it's done through the county. And we get that money, I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I think like if Pico has a piece of a parcel that is in Pottstown, I'm just using that as an example, like it's a county thing, but so the county gives us a little bit of a payment in lieu of taxes. So that's where it comes from. Yeah, I can get you the exact payee information.
Okay. What is the process to get in lieu of taxes payment from the private schools and churches in the area if they were willing to do that?
So we would have to put together a request, and we could work together with our solicitor to help formulate that request. But we would have to ask for, some kind of payment in lieu, and maybe explain our hardship situation. And they don't have any obligation to give us anything, but we could certainly ask. And then if we wanted to enter into an agreement, if that, if the negotiation process led us to that point, we could put together some kind of formal agreement or just, hope for the best every year.
Okay. And are you aware that the Hill School pays in lieu of taxes to the borough?
I was not aware of what they pay to the borough.
Okay. And my other question, I just have a few more. I'll be quick. What was the bond for in 2018?
So that was a refi of one of our previous bonds. So likely it would have been the elementary projects. We issued debt, I believe, starting in 2011, because the projects, I'm not sure the exact time of the start of the projects, it was pre my time, but we issued bonds. I'm not sure if we did 4 or 5 bonds. We did 4 elementary projects, but depending on the timing of the issuances, we issued those bonds to cover the cost of the elementary projects. And then in time, we refinanced those bonds because the market was advantageous to get lower rates. So that's why it's titled Series of 2018, but it actually wasn't cash revenue that we issued in 2018.
Okay. And how much is the cultural competency payment that we're doing away with?
I'd have to pull it exactly. It's based on the number of sessions that we have that month. That bill actually goes through Stephen's office, so I don't know if you have more information on.
I can tell you that the majority of the expense is not the trainer. The trainer gives us a good rate. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it, but it's public record. The board pays the bill. Maureen, can I?
Yeah.
It's $700 an hour, $700 a session, I think.
It's 2 hours,
Yeah,
yeah.
$700 per session. So we're
That's not
getting rid of that.
that's not the main issue. The main issue is that we're paying teachers at a we're paying 20 plus teachers during all those times as well. So it's actually a couple $1,000s a session of payments, and then you take that and it's 2 per month. So I don't know. We would have to do the figuring because we meet differently, but it's was way more than what I thought it was.
Okay.
Because we're paying not just the hourly rate, but then we have to pay all the PSERs on that rate. We have to pay the medical insurance on that rate, or not medical, I'm sorry, the FICA,
Yeah.
Social Security, etc. You take that times the number of teachers in the room. Now, obviously, if they don't show up, then we don't pay. But we're paying them, so they were showing up, and it's 2 cohorts. So we ran you don't pay for admin except for the trainer itself, but for all teachers you're paying for both sessions. So I think I would estimate I think it's over 20,000, but please don't quote me because I don't we've been talking a lot of figures, but it's, like I say, not a small number.
We have it. We can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not mixed in with the regular professional development. This is an addition to professional development.
Yeah, we pulled that out of the professional development
We
budget.
did not budget for that in the
Correct.
next year. So the numbers you saw was not including those because it was one of the many identified stressors from last year, which is only to say, based on our conversations of, all right, what is necessary, what hurts student life, et cetera. And there it is.
Okay. And last 2 questions. Support staff days, paid days, that's being reduced by 3 days.
Yes, so it's actually being reduced by 5 total days. They get 3 paid holidays a year contractually. And we, at one point, had their calendar mimic the teacher calendar, which was 190 days. And just for purpose of savings and scheduling, we reduced them to 185 days.
Okay, because those are the days
184.
that's like what part of the summer?
Professional development.
Okay. And we're really getting rid of social media position. That position is going away, or is that position being transferred to something else?
It is going away.
Okay. And those folks in that position are going away as well?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't see the need for that?
We absolutely see the need for it.
Okay. And in this spread, the librarians are a part of that efficiency, and they're being transferred to work inside the school as teachers?
Yes, ma'am. Open positions. There are 13 retirements this year, which is, depending upon who you're talking to, a blessing and or a curse. But those 13 retirements allow for open positions. And part of the efficiency is, instead of trying to replace those positions, or some other scheme, taking people who are already within our system, and making sure that they have jobs.
So what happens if they don't want it? Because that's the emails that we're getting. They're not interested in being transferred. So who fills those positions in the classroom if the librarians don't accept the transfer?
Well, I think I should say that it's not a matter of accepting. If any person within the organization, that is, administrator, teacher, or paraprofessional, if they are transferred for any number of reasons, oftentimes it has to do with student need, but
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah. I understand that.
so,
But what if they leave, they quit?
well, if they leave, then we would advertise and fill the position with a new person.
Okay. And how much are we saving on that? What's the efficiency? What's the dollar amount?
I can pull it.
Okay. And
Uh,
that's my last question.
Should I jump in then, or are you pulling
Yeah,
something
sure,
up now?
Mrs. Johnson, and then
Okay.
I'll look up the answer for Mrs. Spence. Then I
Okay,
can, when I get a
and
minute.
feel free to add that in whenever.
Okay,
So, and Mrs. Spence did kind of get into the question of the paraprofessionals and the reduction in days, but I'm going to ask for a little further clarification. So those days that are being taken away, there are any of the days that are being taken away holidays? Or is it all professional development?
Professional development
Okay.
at one time. So one of the lenses that we are looking through is, what was our practice before?
Mhm.
So when we had more, I'm not ashamed to admit that part of my recommendation is that we give more. So there used to be a time when none of our paraprofessionals had a single day of professional development. Then we added a little, and we said, we were actually taking the 20 hours of required professional development by the state, and we were pulling those individuals out of the classroom, much to the detriment of everyone in the system. At the time, that's all we could do, circa 2006.
Mhm.
As we got more and looked at our system, we began to add more. Eventually, we realized, well, this is kind of confusing, and uh, can't we just kind of mimic the calendars? We had the money to do it. We like investing in our staff, even though sometimes, one of our issues was that we didn't have anything for those staff to do, and I'm admitting that freely here, but at the same time, understanding that when they're with us, sometimes they would just sit in some of our teacher lessons, even though they're not teachers, and that wasn't necessarily useful to them. We still invited them to do that. Some of our paraprofessionals choose not to be here on those days. That's their choice. But we were providing it. Now that we're in a position of having to reconfigure and reimagine, because we know that history, that was the recommendation. I hope that explains the thought.
That does. And I guess I'll just note, like, one of the things, I don't know that it's a huge deal to the paraprofessionals who are impacted. At the end of the day, I don't know how true my sense is, but my sense is that having the paraprofessionals in with professional development as much as possible adds to the sense of being on the same team. One of the things that I would see sometimes when I've volunteered in the schools over the years has been, you've kind of got these different perspectives, or like some people more out of the loop than others. And one of the things I like about that inclusion is it's bringing everybody on the same page. I do understand I not only understand, but I can appreciate that we're looking back to what did we use to make work when we had fewer resources, and that we'd go back to that when appropriate, but it is kind of a bummer. I mean, this whole thing's a bummer though, so that kind of goes without saying. I do have a couple questions. So projections. I know I had asked for some of those projections, so thank you for putting that together. One thing that I feel like is missing, that was part of what I had asked for, and in my opinion, really important, is to carry forward the increases that we're expecting this year, not just in terms of expenses, but in terms of the revenue increase. So I don't think we should assume flat funding from the state in future years. I think that I just don't think that that's realistic. It's certainly not what the court mandated. It just feels to me like we should assume an increase, and maybe that is a little more conservative or a little bit more, if the increase were what it should be. I would think I'd like to carry forward the increase we're expecting for this year. That wasn't on there, right? You flat funded for next year and next year.
Correct, but this year I used the proposed budget that we already kind of carved.
Right.
And then for subsequent years, and the reason why I just did flat was just so we could see, like, what does that look like? And again, we get stuck in this pickle of they don't have to pass a budget. We do have to pass a budget. So even when we think we're getting an increase, will we really get the increase? Like,
right. You're being conservative in your budgeting. And I see the value in that. I just think as we're making these decisions, I want to be able to look at what happens to our fund balance in what I consider to be a more realistic scenario, which is that we get some increases. And so maybe the next time we're looking at stuff, if we could add in, the increase we got last year, or however, whatever we're adding in for this year, you're still doing, you're budgeting on half of what the governor proposed.
Yes.
Which I have been told from multiple perspectives that we could reliably budget on more than half.
Which would make that 3.3 use of fund balance even less.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And if that kind of behavior carried forward, it would ease this a lot. And I don't want to bank on it, but I also don't want to bank on a worst case scenario and make cuts that maybe we don't need to make. And I'm not saying we don't. I think we have to make some cuts. I'm not disputing some of that, but I really want to look at, okay, if we get approximately, what we got last year or what we think we might get this year, each future year, I think that'll help us plan with a little bit of a clearer perspective or a more realistic perspective. And in addition to that, the other thing I had asked for that I know is a little bit tougher to plot, but at least if we can get close, is if we get cyber charter reform, I want to know what that would mean for us. And I'm not saying that I think that we'll get something this year. I hope it's good. It might be. I want to know what that will mean for us. Like if we have a flat rate, like right now it's, 8,000 per regular ed student, and there are different proposals out there for special ed. But if we could have an estimate of if we had those flat rates in future years, I think that would be so valuable. Especially since we're trying to wait to pass the final budget until we have a sense as good as possible. That's my request. I do have more questions, but I'll let you, if you want to comment to that first.
No, I can absolutely, give additional projections with a little bit of different, scenarios. I'll do a few scenarios of state increased funding so you can see that. And then also look at what's on the table currently for the charter reform and see, as you know, what we had on the table last year is no longer on the table. Right. So it's,
I know.
Trying to pin it down is extremely difficult, but any amount of 100,000, hopefully multiple hundreds of thousands in reform would be extremely helpful.
Right. And it would hold it, because part of the problem we're seeing right now is the way the funding is structured. It says you get an increase, a solid chunk of that is right out the door to the charters. And because the charter reforms are pinning it more to costs for cyber specifically, it would potentially be even more impact than just the percentage. It's the actual reduction it wouldn't be as driven up by our increases.
Yeah,
So
it
anyway.
almost reverse compound, which would be.
That's why,
yeah.
and that's why I want to see, because not only will that help us should something come through, it also helps us to advocate, to say, look at the difference in how this takes us if we have reforms like this. Look at how it stops the bleeding, like in a meaningful way, if indeed it does. The other questions I have are a little bit less systemic. Actually, maybe that's not totally true. With the music, we moved through those end slides really quickly. And if you want to pull them up again, you
Sure.
can. If with the music, I know you had said, we can offer the same services with 6 people instead of 7. And I just know that all of the band parents, along with me, are like, how is that possible that we could do the same with less? I know one thing that was touched on was the scheduling. And I wanted to look at that a little closer. And maybe if anybody can expound on that a little bit more.
Yeah,
I would
I
love
can
that.
do that, Mrs. Johnson. Thank you for the question. Obviously, this is a paper exercise. So what was done here was we took the number of minutes in instruction and looked at how we could make things more efficient. No, how does the old expression go? No plan survives contact with the enemy. So we know and understand that when you've got kids all over the district. As an example, when you've got a trombone player that's at Rupert and you've got a trombone player that's at the opposite end of the district in Barth, even if they happen to be in the same elective class at the same time, you can't have one teacher in 2 locations. That doesn't work well. So we understand that some of this has to get worked out, but what we do definitely know is that there is time within these schedules that I would like, by the way, I would like to just leave it alone. But given the fact that there is a retirement here, it gave us an opportunity to look and say, okay, if teachers don't have homerooms, and they also aren't running any type of lessons, is there an opportunity there to reset the way that we do business within school to capitalize and make sure that students have what they need? Now, there's a million details here in terms of, you know, thought philosophy of one teacher versus another. Who's responsible? Can you work within a team environment, or is it better to lead with one person? There's a lot of stuff that we could get into. And some of that is we're going to have to debate some of these things with our administrators as well as with our teaching staff, because we all have the same goal. We've recognized, and I've said over and over again to those who have asked me, we must protect our elementary program, because without an elementary program, we don't have a middle school program. Without a middle school program, we don't have a high school program. So we must protect it and we must rethink it. The thing that everybody wants from me right now is answers, and I can make some proposals, but until it is shared with and vetted through our stakeholders, it's not really going to be worth much. What's more, we're also looking at not replacing, and I'll give you one that I was debating with staff, like in a positive way, not a negative way, but we're not replacing one of our computer science teachers. While no one is super upset or knocking down our doors with regard to Microsoft Excel or Word, there is something to be said for what that means in terms of the overall schedule and how we do business at the middle school. So one thing affects the other thing. And unfortunately, we're not at the place where we can definitively say, this is what it's going to look like. And I'm going to tell you right now, things are going to change. Teachers may be asked to do things differently, and we're not going to have the ability to say, you cover the office during this hour. in the middle of the day. I don't think that's going to happen. And I'm going to tell you that there's probably at least one principal who's watching and his head or her is exploding because I just said that, because you always need somebody in the main office. And if it's not the secretary, who is it? Those are going to be tough questions that I don't have answers for.
But seeing the minutes and having a little more time to digest that was helpful. So I appreciate that. Does that, the travel time, is that in those scheduled minutes?
Right now,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in the total minutes, it's in there, but in the schedules, it's pulled out of, actual time. Yeah. Right now, I think we only have one teacher who goes, it's on the 6-day cycle. So if they're at a building, typically there's only one teacher who's like not at that building the entire day. So even though they split buildings, they're either at one building or the other. They're not moving midday. So that is a little helpful with scheduling. And I apologize because there's 2 misspellings on that slide that I just noticed. So that's why I pulled it down. So I wouldn't continue to highlight my
I didn't
my
actually notice.
bad
I was,
grammar. So apologies.
Okay.
The music schedules, like when we put them together, like what we looked at is isolated blocks of unassigned time related to their task, teaching music. And that's, consuming that all together is what Maureen came up with. Do want to say, like, the other thing I think that we need to take into account when you look at music and music lessons is a lot of districts, these functions of lessons take place before and after school. Like, they're not done traditionally during the day. And that's something that's different here. And I think what Mr. Rodriguez, like, things would look a lot different. I mean, I've been in another district. It didn't take place during the school day. It took place before and after school.
I think part of the success of our program, though, is that they're during the day. I think we have more participation because they're during the day. So I'm just throwing that out there as it's one of the upsides, even though, yeah, it is different.
that is a non-debatable issue. There is no question about that.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Last question, and maybe it'll be a touch quicker. Counselors, I saw that there would be, for elementary counselors, it would be a rotation type of situation. Do we have, thinking of your quote about plans, and I said, what did you say? Plans are
Not
great.
survive. They do not survive contact with the enemy.
Well, and I was thinking, I don't know about the enemy, but if anything, just reality. Like, that's when plans hit, when the rubber meets the road, it just feels like, what does this actually look like? And I was curious about that in regards to counselors, because I'm trying to figure out, is it a matter of which school gets shafted? Because that's kind of what it feels like when I look at that. I'm like, who's getting the short straw there?
Well, it's an excellent question. And just for purposes of anyone who's tuning in, because I'm always aware, because I get the accusations later that some of what we talk about, if given a specific point in time, seems kind of weird. There are no enemies on our team. What I was talking about is only that when you can make a plan, but then when you go to fulfill that plan, things often change because there are other things at play that you don't consider. So I just wanted to put that qualifier out there. With regard to the rotation, again, thinking about what we had pre-COVID, we had no counselors at the elementary school, zero.
I remember.
Yeah, and related arts. We have done a related arts movement where one professional covers 2 schools. Thankfully, we now only have 4 elementary schools, so that makes it much less messy than it used to be when we had more than that. But I will again say, my faith is in the team, not in my ability to prognosticate what will happen. My plan, and I've said this before, I'll say it again. The reason I think that we have been successful is not because I have the great ideas. It's because I believe in a process. And that process is you put stakeholders in a room, you duke out all of the major issues and the ideas, you come up with a solid plan, you execute that plan, and then you have specific times for feedback, because sometimes a small tweak will make it better, or sometimes the plan is just terrible and we need to scrap it and do something different. And I think this board knows that if, wherever we are in a year, I'm going to be telling you about it. So I don't know what that looks like, but it would never, I mean, thinking of the individuals who lead our schools, if they felt that they were, as you say, getting the shaft, I believe that they would be in my ear very, very quickly.
Got it. Okay, I'm good. Thanks for all the answers.
I see Mr. Amato, but I do want to note that Mrs. Spence, the 4 professional staff librarians, the cost is $444,871.
Yes, thank you. I have another question, so I'll wait until Mr. Armato and Mrs. Lawrence go.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you to Ms. Spence and Mrs. Johnson, because I thought I had a long list of questions. And I think between the two of you, you covered about every one of them. So I appreciate that. I do have one question for Mrs. Oakley about Homestead Farmstead. Do we know, are we past the time period now where someone can register for that for the 25-26 school year, or not?
We're past that. Those mailings go out in December, and I have to check the exact deadline, but we're definitely past it at this point for this
So
year.
do we know, where do we look at, did we gain more people who are eligible applying for it, or we stayed the same, or we were less? How's that number play out? Because that affects how much each person does eventually receive. Okay.
Is someone on mute?
Yeah.
She is on mute, but I believe she's searching for the answer.
Okay, thank you.
I am sorry, and I couldn't get back to my screen. So we are, I was trying to pull the slide up. I think you can see it now. We declined from 3664 homesteads to 3624. So we lost 40 in this last, from 24-25 to 25-26.
Okay. And so we don't know whether that's because, and I'm not expecting you to know, we don't know whether that's just because people did not follow through on updating their request, or those properties fell off of being qualified for Homestead Farmstead.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think Ms. Spence and Mrs. Johnson, I know that I crossed off everything on my list as they went along.
All right, Mrs. Lawrence.
And yeah, some of my questions were answered, not all of them. But just a couple questions and a couple comments. First of all, going through that whole thing we did at the beginning with the buildings, and if we say that it sounded like we're going to table that, does that then change any of the amount? Like, some of our money was already budgeted for that stuff, and that would now be available, or doesn't that change anything?
No, it doesn't change anything because we didn't have anything in this budget for any type of projects. The only project that we have this summer is the chiller, and there's a few other like minimal small things that we have in this budget.
So when they were saying they wanted to move ahead to get that would have been an additional cost.
Yeah, the engineering costs, if we decided to move forward with drawn out specs and engineering, that would have been additional costs. And Mrs. Spence asked how could we pay for that? And the answer could be capital reserve funds. So you would use fund balance if you wanted to start to move towards a project.
Okay.
Wants to add further to answer that a little bit more with the money that we have, if you just take the entire total, which is I believe $27 million in the reserve. That's, some of those are specifically named that we can't just use it for, like the Peasers money, etc. But if you recall some of our conversation back last summer, I believe it was Mr. Hilton, who pointed out, took some time and saw that if you look at all of the repairs and all of the projects, not just district admin and not just Edgewood, we're looking at many millions of dollars to the tune of 50 million. So the DOA and let me say the Beach Street facility or our admin building, as well as Edgewood, are simply the two buildings that are in greatest need and the two buildings that we think could potentially have some level of failure that would cost more, which is why we put them at the top. But there's other things that must get done. They don't have to get done today, but they must get done. So that was the conversation. I think hopefully part of what you were talking about in terms of the cost of the district admin building.
Yeah, I was just, when I had asked that question, I was just thinking, I think that the admin building does take a lot, there's a lot needs to be fixed with that building. And I know we had talked about that before, about moving it or moving I don't know, different things. So, still was a lot of confusing stuff, but that's just me. So you keep saying that that there was no layoffs, but then you say that the social media person isn't going to be back. And I still don't know what happened to the homeschool visitors. Are they gone too? So then people have been laid off or will be, is what I'm hearing.
And what I'll say is that we said things at specific points in time, and then we've gone beyond that. So with the first look, we talked about furloughs, and then as we began to continue to look at things, we realized, well, wait a second, okay. If you furlough someone, this is what a furlough really means. It means for economic or other purposes, you're eliminating a position. It means that person has no other place to work. They don't get a paycheck. They lose all their benefits, and they go to the unemployment building and get in line. That's what a furlough is. So now what we're saying is we've rethought about that and not rethought about it. We've been working on it the whole time. We don't want that. And one of the caveats of putting this together is to not have furloughs. So now, up to and including the home and school visitor, the virtual coach at the high school, and the social media communications, if this goes through if the budget goes through as presented, they will be offered other positions. So those offers may not be the same salary, and I acknowledge that. They may not be the same salary. It might be less salary. In fact, I would say for the most part, it will be less salary. But it means that they would keep their benefits, and they are actually entitled to get a little bit of unemployment for the difference between what we have. And meanwhile, we're looking for positions within the district that would be more commensurate with their salaries and positions. So what that means is that the first look budget said furloughs. Now we're at a place where we're saying, well, it's not a furlough because we're going to offer you something to make sure that you've got some level of money, you've got some level of you've got your benefits in place, and that there's something further. So since then, a couple of people have appreciated, and I'll remind board members that I asked and said we need to tell people, because even though it is the harder thing to do, it is the more moral thing to do. So I'm pleased to say that at least a couple of people have moved up their plans of doing some things different, and in some cases made new plans. And we're supporting them through that, up to and including me personally. we're supporting them through that to make sure that they have as soft a landing as they can. But technically speaking, we went from furloughs to non-furloughs. Is that clear? Did I explain that?
Yeah, yeah. It's just, it seems, I feel like I'm in kind of like a shell game, like things are just moving and I'm not, I get it, but I do think to some people that's going to be, they're going to make that choice that maybe that's not what's going to work for them. So in a sense, it is it's not a layoff, but I think we're going to be forcing some people out the door, even if we don't want to, even if we don't say it that way. Um, my last question is just this, just thinking about this I mean, it all looks like one thing in dollars and cents. And if we take this person and again, it's like a shell game. That'll eliminate this salary, but then they're going to have to be a it's all kind of like a house of cards, I think. But ultimately, I do think we have to think about the fact that some of those cuts, like number one, the librarians, number two, the math teachers, and number three, my counselors, that if we do these cuts, what is going to happen down the road if the students' scores or their performance goes down? And if that happens, we're going to be in bigger trouble with the state than we are now in terms of improvement plans and everything else. And I did a little peer review research and found nothing surprising, but I mean, I'm happy to share some of these sources. But with the librarians, for example, they've said a lot of schools have been doing this, cutting the librarians and putting in paraprofessionals. And they've done studies, a bunch of studies, that the schools that happens to, their scores in the language arts are going down. And they're also more likely to be the schools that are struggling in the first place and the schools that are low income. So it's just going to make more of a disparity between our school and others, I think, to me, the librarians, at least one of the two math teachers at the high school and my elementary counselor, to me, they're non-negotiable. I think those are really important for the well-being of our kids, for their academic performance, for their mental health. And when I was just kind of doing the math, adding up how much that would have cost to keep those people, I'm getting in the realm of about 600,000, maybe something like that, again, depending on how you move things around. To me, that would be worth taking that from the fund balance, because I just think those are crucial. If we say our kids can't read, they can't do math, then how are we cutting there? It just doesn't make sense to me. So that's just my 2 cents. And, I get it. And I understand that nothing we do is great, but to me, those positions are just crucial. And I feel like we're hurting our kids if we cut all those things. So that's just my 2 cents. So thank you.
I see Mrs. Bearden, and then I know Mrs. Spence had another question, so I'm not sure which order you guys would prefer.
I'll defer to Ms. Spence.
Okay.
Thank you, Board President. So I have two other questions. One just came up when Mrs. Lawrence was speaking. But first, I want to talk about the school voucher. So they just sent the school voucher program to the Senate, to the state Senate, for approval, for vote. So that's something else that will come up either in this budget or the next one, 26, 27, and further reduce the amount of funds that we get from the state. So not only do we have to pay charter school tuition, but we're going to have to split our income from the state with parents who want to take their child to a private school. So it seems like it's getting more speed forward than less. So I think it is realistic to keep the budget flat, because it may be less money and not flat. And on top of that, there's no way we can depend on federal funds when the current administration clearly states, and has been saying this for a very long time, prior to even being in this administration, that they're destroying or cutting the federal Department of Education. And I know they transferred some duties over to not human resources, Health and Human Resources, HSA, anyway,
HHS.
transferred it over. And they transferred student loans to the SBA, which is very interesting. But what's to leave us? Where are our funds? Like, what's going to happen with our funds is only going to be less money going down the road, not more. And I think we have to keep that number flat. And I'm not saying that we don't use reserve funds to save some of our programming, because our kids can't read, write, and do math at grade level. And I've been saying this for many, many years, and it's only getting worse. It's not getting better. So which brings my next question. Are librarians reading certified? Like, do librarians, are they doing reading coaching with our kiddos? And I ask this because there are schools that are economically disadvantaged, and they're still able to have students that read, write, and do math at grade level. Steubenville, Ohio, right? That's a model school. All of their students are model district. All of their students are economically disadvantaged, but they read at grade level. And I do believe they have librarians. So do librarians, are they reading coaches for the students at elementary level?
With regard to certification, librarians have their own certification. A reading specialist is, which would be the type of people that
That's the right, I'm sorry, that's the right terminology, reading specialist.
Yeah, reading specialist. Mr. Boyer, can you weigh in here? I do not believe that any of our librarians are reading specialists. I think they have other certifications. Librarian is often an add-on, but Mr. Boyer, can you comment?
Yeah, I mean, I can't be 100% sure, but I don't think any of our librarians have a reading specialist certification. But I mean, I could check for you, Ms. Spence, for 100% accuracy, but I don't believe so.
Okay, so can anybody explain their duties within the day then?
I mean, I know that you know, the high school and middle school are much different than the elementary buildings. You know, I know that, I mean, at the high school, you know, it's run, from what I know, you know, like a library where students come in for as a resource and research. And then also at the middle school, I believe that it's the same type of model with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. 5th grade, I believe, still has what's called a library class that kind of orients them to library and the library standards that they go over. And then in the elementary building, like each class has a related art related to library according to what that curriculum would be to deliver. So, you know, it's different, but you know, they are professionals in there, and you know, they operate the library at, you know, a really high capacity. They do.
And while just to give honor to the absent, while it is true they don't have reading certification, there's no question that they support and push reading, and they can be some of the best storytellers out there. So when kids run around, they're excited about books, they'll ask our librarians A, where to get it, and B, maybe, you know, what type of interest they could explore, and then oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes I'll walk in and see librarians reading stories to kids.
And I know teachers, you know, they will take their class to the library for a library lesson on whatever that is going on in their classroom, and you know, libraries plan and facilitate that with the kids.
Patience and fortitude. Those are the names of the two lions that protect the library in New York City. And so I'll leave with that. Thanks for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Bearden?
Thank you for the questions from the board who's posed their questions so far. I want to make sure we're capturing any comments and questions from any other board members that have not already posed any questions. Because it's important that we have all members' voices here. It could jog something, a suggestion. It's helpful. So first, I wanted to state that. Second is I don't like any of it, right? Like the rest of the board, none of us are happy that we're in the scenario that we're in, but you know, we've always functioned as a board since at least I've been on, is that we budget based upon what is known, and then anything else outside of that was cushion. And so I know the advocacy efforts that our leads on this board have performed and been successful with. So in that essence, if there's going to ever be a reporting that you do for forecasting, say for future years, to take into consideration possibly more that we're told, or you want to go into the middle ground versus going 50% of what we've been told. If you want to take it to possibly 65 or 75%, I would like to see that in a separated column. If you're going to do that, I would like to see that in a separated column, because perhaps at that time we could begin transitioning staff back into their standard positions. So in waves, right? Something that's organized, that if we are in this, we're projecting, and if we're in this column, we know we can't transition staff members back. We have to hold the line unless and until something changes from federal monies or something of that nature. But if we receive what's in this column, which would be that additional to the 65 or 75%, which would be over the 50% by approximately 50%, obviously, then we'd know at this juncture we could at a certain date, end of a semester, begin transitioning in waves. Like we can transition, wave one, who would be in wave one that we would see as pertinent to be able to go back into their positions. So I would, if that would happen, I would like to see that. Woe to us if we had ever budgeted monies that were promised to us that we didn't receive, because we'd be further in the hole than where we are now, simply because things have changed and evolved so much with businesses, hospital taxes coming off the roll. We were living high off the hog, so to speak, when we had all of the foundries here. And we didn't have the level, I would say we didn't have the level of need that we do now, for which we have with special education needs and transient, where we're trying to make sure we have a good eye on the students' movement, to make sure we're educating all of our students that are in the district, whether we've heard of them or not. I would like to see the librarians stay, and the reason is because our students have to go to college and locate information in the library. And the librarians aren't necessarily stationed there in such a way in those colleges when they're going, if they're going, to be able to give certain levels of instruction. I age myself, but when I was in college, we had to go locate microfiche, and it was in the basement, and you had to know, just by looking at certain things and how that library was set up. And so, you had a basis of what libraries you were in, in elementary school versus junior high school. For us at that time, it was junior high versus high school, and what the setup was. You had a good idea and feel of how to read and locate certain things that weren't standard. Now, that said, I understand value. I do. And I'm glad we're looking at things from a historical perspective to say, can we actually sustain certain programs such as beginners band? I believe from historical value, we had less instructors in prior years and more students for those instructors to have to provide lessons with, but perhaps the schedules were different. I can say that my instruction from fourth grade on was during classes, and that was a coordinated effort that the staff and the instructors were able to work out. So it was not a surprise to a teacher that an instructor was coming and asking and requesting for certain persons to leave because it was scheduled in advance. So that possibly is a big piece, that there's more of a coordinated effort to cause less disruption to the classrooms for our teachers. But moving back to the decisions that we're looking at making, we have our issues. We have a flow base upon, whatever data and the integrity of that data that we have. And, the suggestions are being received right now. And we have to make a best decision, because I've woke up out of my sleep several times about what decisions were in front of us. And my biggest piece, I think, that I walked away finding some bit of sleep behind it, was that our decisions have some level of fluidity. If we see a negative, to Mrs. Lawrence's point, if we see a negative flux, I mean, just a downward spiral of monitored scores, behavior, attendance, staff hindrance, et cetera, we could be able to pivot and reassess and have steps forward that would kind of provide a safeguard for a specific area that we see. Now, that would be a specific area. If we see all of the areas on a downward flux, how we would be able to pivot and reassess. Obviously, that would be difficult, but at least we have a buffer, I think, in us creating a plan based upon the knowns, which is the 50% of governor funds, versus budgeting more. We have an ability to have a cushion, possibly, but I don't see this turning the curve, because even such things as meals for our students, I've seen that come up several times in discussion of chops, right? That from our current administration, and we know that our students, we've talked about it, low income and poverty line and so forth, which I believe certainly is a responsibility that I believe should be wholly absorbed by federal funding, and it should never be a situation where we would have to look at our cafeteria or funding for meals as an expense, like it's a non-essential. It's an essential. It's not a luxury. So that said, again, I appreciate how everything's been presented, and I appreciate the questions and suggestions that the board members who have already spoke have posed. I just want to make sure that all of the board members have been able to, if it's not something that's already been posed, if you do have a question, it may be something that the public wants to hear, or has, is waiting for that question because they have that question. I would ask that if there is any board member that does still have some lingering piece, that you pose that for suggestion or for clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Klein?
Thank you. First off, I do really appreciate the fact that you started looking at instructional hours and you broke down the instrumental music teachers that way, that made a lot of sense to me. It's kind of my background, but that did make a lot of sense, and I think that was very beneficial to everyone. Um, so the question, I guess, is for Mrs. Oakley. You said in April our deficit is still 3.1 million, correct?
Yeah, we're right around 3.3 million. I can pull that back up if you'd like.
That's okay. That's okay. So if we're at 3.3 million, I'm just wondering how the administration proposes to move that 3.3 million to a balanced budget.
Fund balance. Pure and simple. Take the 27 million that we have, and I cannot in good conscience, and I know this is not your question, but I don't, we're taking a big hit this year. If everything gets approved, we're taking a big hit this year in operations. So and you know, I would say my strong recommendation is that $3.3 million is covered with fund balance. The danger, and I know this is not your question, but the sentiment out there is, well, let's take a little more out of fund balance. You know, if you would have asked me 12 or 13 months ago, hey, do you think the Pottstown School District is going to be looking at this type of a financial issue? I think most of us, even if you tied us to a lie detector test, none of us would have said, yeah, we think we're going to have a deficit next year. I mean, we had done a lot of good things, and again, not apologizing for the fact that we recommended to put this money into school issues. But if I could go back in time, Mr. Klein, I will tell you that I would have said, whoa, wait a second. Let's make sure that we know where we're going here, and limit our expenses. I didn't do it then because I didn't have that feeling, but let me do so now and let the board hear this, and members of the public. Um, I have serious reservation about what our financial future will look like in the future. That's not to say I'm not, you know, trying to say everything is bad, and I'm also not trying to say we won't get more money, because I mean, just a couple of days ago, I was advocating for cyber change, which would be a big deal for us. But we also have big threats, and we also have some other things with regard to reshoring and all the other things that are going on with the federal government. Whether people agree with what's happening or not, whether we end up in a better place or not, it's very possible we will be in a recession in less than 12 months. So again, I'm not, you know, I want to provide an even balanced tone to my message. My message is not the sky is falling, but I am saying, if anybody wants to look, write it down, Thursday, May 8th. Stephen is saying, I think we need to exercise serious financial caution for the next 2 to 5 years. And that is an unmitigated recommendation. We should be very careful. We should lower our footprint. If we do not, 4%, as Maureen indicated for next year, if we, you know, some of the figures Mrs. Lawrence said, you know, 600,000, I think we can do some figuring on that so that the board knows exactly what they're voting on. But I think it's probably more like 750,000, but that means that the overall footprint is bigger. So if our footprint is smaller and we're looking at 4% next year, I'd rather have 4% of a smaller footprint than 4% of a bigger footprint, because that means we will potentially have more things that we need to consider cutting next year. So I wanted to make sure to say that. Thank you, Mr. Klein, for the opportunity. But I just think it's important that no matter where we go, I'm okay with it. Maureen is okay with it. We present you with the information, and you must decide. But we wanted to make sure to be on the record that we think caution is the order of the day, but we absolutely need to use 3.3 or 3.5 million of fund balance to make it through.
Thank you.
Ms. Kansanik?
Yes, most of my questions were answered, and this wasn't, I don't think I asked this question before, so if people don't have an answer, that's fine. You can get it to me later, but it's about the cuts in special ed. There was two positions, I believe, that were not going to be refilled. And my question is, what is that going to do to the quality of the services we provide? And will that open us up for problems down the road? Will that decrease children's ability to have one-on-one sessions? I mean, like, what does that look like? And is the staff that we have now, how do they, I mean, I guess they're not going to be like, it'll be great. But do they feel any kind of confidence? It just seems like the services are going to take a hit, and I want some clarification on that.
How about I start and Mr. Boyer can either, you know, again, add or correct as needed. Uh, So again, no apologies. I believe it's the OT and speech position that we're talking about, not replacing. No apologies for having those staff. But the reality is when we look at the numbers and as everyone knows, there are certain numbers associated, like when it comes to and I'll go to the autistic students because they have a warm place in my heart. If you go to Franklin Elementary School, we have a couple of autistic classes. The maximum you can have in that classroom is 8. And some people I'm a special ed teacher, so some people from the outside might say, 8, that's ridiculous. That's hardly, you know, and plus you've got 2 assistants in there, but you don't understand the level of need. So the level of need is great. Um, Conversely, we're not close. We have not been close to where'd you go? Oh, Mrs. Can. Oh, you took your hand down and you moved. Sorry. We have not been close to the maximums. We have been well below the maximums. We have allowed, unlike many other places where staff can essentially get integrated in the schools, which by the way, I'm going to tell you, it's a great thing. It's a great privilege to have. But most other schools don't operate that way. They operate based on caseload. So just like you're only allowed to have 8 in an autistic classroom, for some of these others, the maximum is much higher. So if we're going from a caseload of, you know, 38 to 50, yeah, no question, that's 12 more kids. But the max is 60. That's an example, but you get an idea. Mr. Boyer, did I cover it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you did. I mean, Ms. Kantianik, I think the simple answer is, anytime you have less help, like you create a different situation. And, more help is always a benefit to stuff. But, when we went through these things, like, we tried to do it with the intention that it's the less impact on kids in all the positions. But if you take away an adult, like obviously the situation changes, and we have to figure it out so we can deliver the same service. But you know how it's going to look, moving forward with things, I think we'll be able to figure it out. But it just it's not going to look the same.
Yeah, it's a luxury we just felt like we could no longer afford.
Can I follow up to this same question? And I don't expect you to do this, but I'm going to use it as an example. You laid out rather nicely the hours that the music teachers had, and so were these speech and OT therapists like had free time, or like what? Did they have nothing to do? I don't understand. Like, I get it, they didn't have maximum caseloads, but what were they doing then?
So when staff are not, typically speaking, in most school districts, that type of staff is moving much more from one caseload to another. I want to make sure that everyone understands. I am not saying that we were paying healthy salaries to these people to sit around and eat bonbons. No, they did a lot of great work with great kids, but that wasn't the question. The question is, you know, how can you do this with regard to caseload? So the answer is that we are still, and I checked, I double checked, we have a director who would be on the line with the state just as much as I would. We both sign pieces of paper that say where our caseloads are. So we are well within I mean, obvious, are we going to be higher? Well, of course, you can't have less staff and not increase your, our caseloads will be higher. Will they hit the maximum or go beyond the maximum? They will not. And if they do, I can tell you that I'm going to be in front of you, Mr. Boyer, and I will be in front of you, telling you that situation and giving you the recommendation.
I see Mr. Amato. I don't know if that's a new hand or.
Yes, it is a new hand. Well, it's part of an old body, but it's a new hand. So first, I am prone to use the phrase proud to be from Pottstown a great deal, because I am. And tonight, I think, is another excellent example of why I am. The quality of the discussion that we have had here tonight, the questions asked, the answers given, and the tone and the demeanor in which it has occurred, I think speaks extremely well of the quality of the people we have on our board and our administration. So for that, I am extremely thankful and happy to say, proud to be from Pottstown. In terms of how this all plays out at the end, the sad part is that nobody's going to be happy at the end. I don't know how we can. To the point that several people made already tonight about what I call monitor and adjust, and how do we become efficient and effective, I think will require constant vigilance, and as Mrs. Bearden pointed out, our ability to pivot and change where necessary. Mr. Rodriguez, I want to tell you that you were about as brutally honest as a guy could be from my perspective of your last evaluation of how things look this year, next year, and for the next couple years coming down the road. You said it about as straight as I think you can say it, and sadly, I have to say, I think I agree with you. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, so at this time, I don't see any more questions regarding the budget, but I will ask. So just to make sure that we are all on the same page, Mr. Hilton, Mrs. Bearden, what would you like me to present as a preliminary budget in 2 weeks from now? The budget that we reviewed here tonight, or is there any other changes, inclusions, exclusions that we should be aware of and bring back to you in 2 weeks from now? Mrs. Bearden.
Well, I don't want to overstep Tom, Mr. Hilton, but I would like to ask if board has more comments that they'd like to see more. If there was any information that they feel needs to be clarified for a future meeting. But I would also like to see if there was a straw vote tonight, where everyone would land. Because it's not that I want to put anyone on the spot, but just matter of factly, this is our responsibility, good, bad, or indifferent. And there's not much, for wiggle room. So if we're not where the board wants us to be, then we need to take that guidance so that the administration can, do some changing wherever they feel they can. And if there's not much that can be changed, then it would be incumbent upon the board to then be amenable to going further into the general fund balance to make up whatever that difference is that they just can't, it doesn't sit right with them, and they just feel it's just too much of a necessity or lifeline for our district. So that said, I'd first would like to see if there are any additional questions, and then second, I would like to see a straw vote on if things, if this budget, as you've presented it, with taking 3.3 from the general fund balance and increasing to the millage that you suggested, if who would be willing at this time to vote for that? And if not, once we have that vote, I'd like to know where those directors are and what they would like to see changed or suggested, if that's clear.
Mrs. Oakley, I think we're still addressing questions, so.
Yeah, I think I see Mrs. Johnson.
So, Ms. Bearden, I'm trying just to make sure I'm understanding. Are you looking for the straw vote first, or are you looking for any further needs that need to be addressed before the straw vote?
Thank you. So I would like first to see if there's any questions that are still unanswered that you'd like to pose right now, and then straw vote. And then from the straw vote, for the ones who would, if there are any who are not in favor, who would say, as presented, 3.3, whatever, 3.4 from general fund balance, tax increase, we could vote. We don't want to, but we're willing to vote this way. Okay. But if a board member says, no, my questions have been answered thus far, but I still don't like the package that's presented. I still feel there's a different direction that possibly we could take. And I need time to think on that. And then be able to provide whatever they feel they need. Is there a suggestion that we would say, for instance, keep the math teacher, keep the librarians, increase the general fund balance to compensate for those recommendations, if that is that board member or board members' suggestion. So comments, straw vote, and then rationale for what their suggestion is.
That's helpful.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
So my comment is, and it's not a new question, but I'm going to reiterate it because it's going to qualify everything after. My comment is that I want to see projections that include at least half of the governor's proposal for this year in future years. And I actually think it should be more, but I'd settle, like Ms. Spearden, you had said 65% or 70%. I actually think that would probably be more what we should look at, but I do not. I'm going to be a no on the budget as presented until I can see the projections of what our fund balance would look like with those assumptions in terms of revenue. Not because I'm ultimately saying that I will vote no on the budget. If depending on what it looks like, I might vote yes, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not even going to give a straw vote yes to the budget until I see those projections.
Thank you.
Do we go right across the screen, Mrs. Bearden? Okay.
Yes, please.
Mrs. Spence, you're up next.
On the straw vote, I'll be a no.
Mr. Armato?
I would be a no. I would like to see, as Mrs. Johnson said, let's take a look at what those projections might be like if we use higher numbers, and what that would mean in terms of how it affected our personnel and programming.
Okay. Mr. Hilton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lawrence?
100% no.
Mr. Klein?
Yes.
Mr. Heidel?
At this time, no. And Tom, I can't believe you're going to vote for a tax increase.
Mrs. Kansianik?
No.
And Mrs. Bearden?
At this time, no.
Okay. And now I heard from Mr. Armato and Mrs. Johnson their further requests, so I'll just go down my list. Mrs. Lawrence?
What,
additionals or further
yeah,
requests?
the same rationale I said before. I won't vote to lose the librarians, to lose the math teacher, and to lose that counselor, because to me, those 6 positions are crucial to the well-being of our kids and to the academics. And I just see, it's one thing to look ahead and say, oh, financially where we're going to go, but it's another thing to say, what are we doing to our kids? And I believe that those are crucial for our kids' performance. And I think if you want to look at it money wise down the road, it could have ramifications there too if we start losing funding because our schools aren't performing well. So I think that they're crucial. I think that if the budget is the amount that the state gives us is closer to the 60%, like some people said, that will make up that amount. And that's just a hard line for me. I just think that's what our kids need.
Okay, so the library remains
The
on flex,
librarians, at least
math,
one
and
of the math teachers, and my elementary counselor.
Okay. Mrs. Kansianik.
Can you come back to me?
Sure. Mrs. Spence.
Sure. I want us to look further into payment in lieu of taxes. I think we should explore that deeper. I also think we should look for some grant funds. I mean, we got trees, 500K, well, 400K in funds for trees. And I think people are just as important, if not more important than trees. So we spent a lot of 500,000, well, 400, then another 100,000. I don't know if that was grant funds or out of our budget. So I want our kids to read, and it would be great if they could read under a tree. But if they can't read under a tree and we just have the tree, then that's a problem. So librarians, I want cultural competency back in. I want the support staff to have those days back. And again, definitely the math teacher. We can't, I want to hold the line, right? I think we are already to the studs. And I don't want to see these reductions at all. If we hold the line, we're just doing the bare minimum right now. And if we move forward with these reductions, we're on a fast pace slide to not having a district at all. And just like what happens in rural communities. So we have to be fiery and fierce and hold the line. And one, can we also not pay charter school tuition? Can we furlough that?
No, we cannot.
No, the state
Why
takes
not?
money. State
Because-
takes money right out of our bank account within 15 days.
It's not like we get it and give it to them.
They take it out?
Yep, they take it right out of our subsidy money. Faster than they act on anything else, which is even more infuriating.
And Mrs. Spence, appreciate your comments, but I wonder if, like I heard, library cultural competency
Oh,
support.
and social media communications department, I do not want that to go. We're always talking about engaging the parents and communication with the parents, and you all seem to think parents love that and the likes and stuff like that. So I don't want that to go. I don't want anything to go. I want us to hold the line. Let's hold it, because if we let anything go, we are sliding down. And we can hold the line. We have to push back at the state. We gotta go to our representatives and push more for us to get our full allocation for the next year, well, for this year, 25 and 26. We have to do that. We have to say we can't live on anything less. We're gonna starve. We can't. We have to hold the line. And I don't know why we can't pressure our representatives to push forward so we can get more than just 50% of the proposed budget.
Okay, as the chairman of this committee, I'm gonna assert myself a little here. So as I see it right now, we have a straw vote with 2 yeses and 7 nos. Is my math correct on that, Mrs. Oakley? Okay, so Mrs. Johnson wants projections. You understand what they are, Mrs. Oakley? What she wants?
I do, yes.
Okay. Since we've got to pass a budget on the 22nd, or unless we call a special meeting for the 29th on top of that, then I would suggest that we have another straw vote on the 15th after Mrs. Oakley has had a chance to do the projections that Mrs. Johnson is looking for. And it's up to Mr. Rodriguez to decide whether or not he wants to take a little something more out based on what he's heard tonight. That's up to Mr. Rodriguez. But we'll have a straw, I'd like to suggest we have a straw vote next Thursday, one more time. And then what we're gonna end up is we're gonna take it out of the fund balance because you just can't make a difficult decision. That's the way I see it. So, unless, well, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Oakley, you have a few other items, contracts, election of board treasurer, secretary. I'll let you take that right now.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got Mr. Heidel if he had any further requests, because I didn't get to ask him or Mrs. Bearden.
And then we were going to circle back to
Phoebe, yeah.
And I
Okay,
didn't finish. I had something else to say.
Okay, Mr. Heidel?
Deb said she had something else.
Mrs. Pence?
Thank you for being a gentleman. What I wanted to say is we didn't look at sports. Did we look at that? I mean, I saw it up there, but did we do any reductions in that other than just the one position?
No, there's no other reductions, but if you want me to add that to your list of what you would like, I mean, you can.
Sure. I mean, don't we have
yeah.
like programs where students are being transported and it's maybe only 10 students or 5 students for sports programs? We have some students that we have some programs that are not fully like at the max in participation. I mean, if we're to do this budget and reading this in library and math and all of that's to get cut, then I think it should be across the board then. And thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Mr. Heidel?
Yeah, just towards my concerns were the homeschool visitors and basically that with the counselors in the elementary schools, especially elementary schools. That's where I really worry about it because you're going to have 3 counselors. You're going to have no real homeschool visitors because they're going to be trying to do in the building 3 for 4 buildings and then trying to get into homes as well too. One other thing that, I've seen on Facebook and I kind of tend to agree a little bit. I haven't seen any cuts to central administration at all. I know we're bare boned. I know we're staffed. I'm just one example. I was never really for it back in the day, but we did make principals full-time employees. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I wouldn't mind pulling them back to being 190 days like professional staff. Anything in central administration that can help close the gap, that helps the public say, oh yeah, everyone's taking a hit on this because no one feels that's really the case.
So you're talking Act 93 because we do have cuts in Act 93.
Okay, I'm talking about, well, Act 93, but in central administration. And like I said, to me, basically principals. I don't know how much you'd save with each principal, cutting them back to 190.
Central administration would be just directors. So I'm not sure how we would do that. Act 93, if you're talking principals, we did cut a house principal at the middle school, much to the chagrin of Mrs. Lawrence, who did verbalize that has been, I mean, you're correct. Those were the old days where we had administrators, assistant administrators at 220 days, I believe. rather than 260. We never had them at 190 while I was here, but maybe way back in the day. But that was considered a pretty failed model. One that did not lend well to preparing our schools. So we were almost never fully staffed on time. We had all sorts of other difficulties. So, I mean, I would not be able to recommend that, because when there's only, a handful of us that help run the district. So we are cutting back in that area, but eventually we can cut back to say, hey, everybody's cutting back, but it could actually cost us more money. So, I mean, I'll just make that comment that I want to make sure that we don't interrupt the good management of our schools. So, but your point is well taken, Mr. Heidel. Thank you.
Mr. Klein?
I wanted the chance to explain my yes vote.
Sure.
I spent 20 years of my life as a high school principal. When we got into budget meetings and budget discussions with the full administrative staff of those districts, I quickly realized that I knew the high school, but I didn't know junior high and elementary schools. I don't like any of these cuts. I don't like the projections. I don't like any of this. But we've paid 3 people on this screen and in this meeting tonight to be administrators and to know the full scope and picture of Pottstown School District. I don't believe any of us, other than Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Boyer, and Mrs. Oakley, have that knowledge. I, in good conscience, can't say, I think it's best for the district if we do this and not that, because I don't know the picture of the overall district. And that's why I voted yes. Thank you.
Mrs. Kansianik?
I think I'm just echoing some of the things other people have already said. In addition to, I'd like more information still on how many kids are going to be impacted by the speech and OT absences, even though I totally understand the rationale there and what you're saying. I just, seeing it would be helpful.
Okay. And then Mrs. Bearden?
Thank you. I echo the sentiments of what Mr. Klein said, but I also echo what everyone else has said. So I initially said we push back to state, because if the more we yield when these things occur, because they continue to occur, it's every few days something different is popping up on the administration's radar, that we push back and say, we simply can't operate. We're already at thin line. We can't operate further with cuts. So that is a big point of contention for me. I feel like there will be continued cuts. And to Ms. Spence's point of, we have trees, unfortunately, even, the specific departments have taken cuts as well, including, research for, compromised persons, let's say that, which all of us have and will, if we haven't already, dealt with immunocompromised systems. So it's not that the administration has only cut, education at the grammar level. They have, in one fell swoop, cut several departments across the board. So I don't see a lot of positivity in rebounding around the corner without the districts all across the U.S. simply focusing on this administration and saying, you can't do that. Just like the other countries have pushed back on tariffs. But we've seen how that's gone back and forth. I don't know what that will do, but I have to keep positivity in mind. That said, I really do feel that we would be at a loss because librarians do, you know, they wear multi hats like all of our staff do, right? That's not to say that the other staff don't. I just feel like that's a specialized component that we don't have overlap in, so to speak, where I'd like to see it. And so I'm still having an issue with that. And I just wouldn't be ready today for a straw vote to say yes. But all things considered, if we were to just say we must pass a budget because if the budget had to be passed tomorrow, then I would vote yes now. But because we still have time to think about it, and I still have an opportunity to see what that cost would be for librarians, and I apologize, I didn't take a look at that close enough to see would that be able to, how much that would take from the general fund balance if we could factor some version of retaining librarians on some scale. I know we have some. I know it's the question of how we can make sure that they are in place on some sustainable, consistent basis, and whatever that would take, then we would remove that from the general fund balance. I think that's the one ask that I have outside of just the norm of this not being something we want to do, but I'm in agreement that we have tasked the team with providing us guidance in the best possible way to mitigate the least effect that it would cause on our students and staff. And so I'm appreciative of that. And so if my no is in no way saying you haven't done your due diligence, I know it's painstaking. And not only have you done it, but then you have to sit with us and explain why you're doing your best to, you know, provide what you've provided. Certainly, I can speak on behalf of the board and say that none of this is in any way a personal attack on our administrative team. We think we have by far one of the best administrative teams that a school district could have. And we're very appreciative of the effort and the work that you've put in to mitigate the substances that we're in. It's just us having that personal piece, right? And us having passion about where we each are in that regard. So that's my ask. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just remind board members, we will pass a preliminary budget. We'll continue to work on this. If we get more information from the state, if we get, updated, hopefully maybe even the state will pass their budget. We have time between the preliminary and the final, which we're scheduled for June 26th to continue. So I did want to just note that as well. Mr. Hilton, I'll move through the contracts. I should be able to do this fairly quickly. So for board action next week for consideration, we have 4 special education contracts. We have Go Guardian, a classroom management IT contract. We have 6 MCIU contracts for technical leadership, data, which is our early warning system dashboard, for PIMS data collection, cloud backup, security compliance backup, and phishing. We also have our CMD annual renewal, and in that renewal, there is a 0 increase to the cost of the buses. We run 5 buses every single day, so there was 0 increase to that line item. The drivers and the aides' salaries have been increased. And the administrative fee was also increased 4.5%. I will note that this is an area that I've looked at probably more this year than I have in the past as far as options and other contractors, and I've met with other contractors and the IU. And the reality is the most efficiency that we will get from our contractor is being logistically in our footprint, which CMD is. Again, happy to do whatever the will of the board is at any point in time, but trust me, this is an area that I've noticed and we've put a lot of focus on, and hence why we want to bring some of our kids back into our footprint, because it really does make that much of a difference, the less distance you have to travel. Finally,
Please still make that non-consent though, Maureen.
yes, I sure will, Mr. Heidel. Thank you for noting that now, so I can do it before we get to the meeting. The last two items, we need to do the election of the board treasurer, which is a 1-year term, and the election of a board secretary, which actually is a 4-year term. In the past years, I've been named as board secretary. Just the responsibility of the agendas and the minutes all come from my office, and that's the primary function of the board secretary, as well as signing the contracts. If you have something different that you would like me to do, a different direction, please let me know. And our current board treasurer is Mrs. Johnson, and I will leave it up to the committee and the board to decide if they would like to make a change to that as well. And our monthly meeting notice, we will meet on June 12th again for another finance committee. We will meet May 22nd. To do a preliminary budget vote, special meeting on Zoom, just preliminary budget. We will meet next week for our regular scheduled board meeting, in which, per the request of Mr. Hilton, I will disseminate the information that's been requested tonight, and we will take another straw vote. I believe that concludes everything that I have, and I'll pause for questions.
Okay, is everybody okay with that? Another straw vote next week? All right, then I'll declare this committee over and out.
Okay, I assume were there no public comments?
We have one.
Okay. We'll just fold that into the public comments at the beginning of the Community Engagement Committee then. And Ms. Jackson, if you'd be up for also giving your FAC report with the public comment, that would be excellent, so that we can make up for lost time in this committee a little bit.
Okay, gotcha. Good evening, everyone. Mercedes Jackson, East High Street, Pottstown, PA. So my comment was on a couple of the things that were discussed. I just want to say, like, I wanted to, like, maybe donations, like, I'm talking about ways to, save money and be conservative with our current resources that we do have. So, like, for instance, like, instead of items being thrown into dumpsters, talking about old desks, old chairs, things like that, maybe like the Pottstown could sell them, make something off of them. One man's trash is another man's treasure. I just feel like some things are just being very wasteful for being an underfunded school district. Maybe like, even for instance, the lost and found, a lot of those things just are given away, but maybe at the end of the year, I can talk to other FAC parents and see if they want to, go on board with me to, those items, we can have like a yard sale in the summertime and just sell them for $1. That's something's better than nothing. And that can go back into the district, back into our kids for their field trips, for their books, for supplies. Also too, something earlier, I wanted to say, in regards to the meeting that you guys just had, Laura, I definitely appreciated your reply in regards to, paraprofessionals and that inclusion. It is very important for everybody to be on, one accord, same page, no one to feel left out. I also understand Mr. Rodriguez's point as well, because he was talking about, paraprofessionals not maybe being there as many days. There are just, sometimes, and the one who says it the best is Madam President Bearden. It's not cookie cutter, right? Everybody doesn't have the same work ethic. You just have some folks that got some lazy behind bones. And I just think that shouldn't affect for everybody else who is hard workers. So maybe a win-win situation is have a little bit of money aside for the ones who do want to stay over, but it's not off of them. Let it be off of like kind of like working for it, just like March Madness. Everybody doesn't make it to the NFL, right? And everybody doesn't make it to the Super Bowl, I should say. So, so that's what I'm saying in regards to like if different people in different positions want more hours, allow them to kind of get voted in and let their work ethic show for that versus the ones who are sitting around doing absolutely nothing and wasting our tax dollars. Now, going to the FAC update, on May 17th is our Pottstown's Got Talent. I just wanted to say for the people who do not go online onto the QR code to sign up, please don't panic. You can also sign up in person when you come. First come, first serve. And we will be taking people probably up until like maybe the last 30 minutes of the event, just so everybody has time. So I just want to make that clear because there's some people, and also it was brought to my attention. Some people said, hey, no one, I signed up and no one got back to me. No one will get back to you. When you sign up, that's it. Your name goes on the list and that's that. So don't look for a reply like, hey, you got it. No, soon as you fill that out, that's it. You're automatically on the list. So that's all that I have. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, everyone, for your patience and your wisdom and knowledge in these very trying times. Have a blessed week.
Thank you very much. Could we see the agenda for just a minute? I don't think I'll need it left up, but I think I wanna.
I had a bunch of other stuff on my screen. Please give me 1 second. I'm so sorry.
Actually, you know what? I have it pulled up on another screen now, not even to bother to share, but I think just to give me a sense. Okay, I got it. So I'm gonna speed through it and skip a few things because we had a very full budget discussion in the last committee. There is a space here for it though. Are there any questions, particularly from committee members, that you had ready for tonight, knowing we were going to talk about it, that you have not asked yet? Or has everything been covered? I think everything's been covered, at least covered as much as it needs to be right now. One thing I want to ask, because it is directly related to this committee in relation to the budget effect on communications, specifically that social media position, and what does that mean for school district communications if we no longer have a person dedicated to that role? Can you speak to that a little bit, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, and not to put too fine a point on it, but the person most affected has been with us hearing all of our discussions from day one and works directly in my office. So in terms of central admin, I can say that even though he's not part of Act 93, it's the thing that we've all been talking about because and this part, I don't know how this is one of these sticky areas because you're not supposed to talk about specific people, but there's only one social media communications specialist, and he's here with us. So I will speak generally about the budget effect on communications again, as was stated with everything else. We looked at pre-COVID measures and we and we said, what are some things that we added before then or rather after then, and that was one of those positions. So I'm proud to say that we have done a number of videos that have been good for I think the community. We've taken pictures and basically given it to people for free. I mean, for those who remember, if you wanted a picture of your kid, catching the football in that action shot with that very expensive camera, we had somebody who put that on our website, and the kids, would grab it, and moms and dads would grab it. In fact, when we give our awards, one of the number one complaints we get is, "Hey, you took a picture of my kid and I can't see his face. He's got the blue card in front of his face. I want to see my kid's face." So we are constantly saying like, "Hey, bring that down. Mom and dad want to see your face and your smile." So between we have to figure out what we're doing with our website again, because we used to have a website person exclusively. That was way back in the day. Then websites got a little bit easier to manage, but a website is one of our most utilized communication measures. Social media is our second most. And Instagram is now a thing with our kids, and that's because of our communication specialists. So a lot is going to be affected. The hope is that some of the work we have done with specific schools and making sure that they all have social media outlets. Now, they don't use it as much as my office does. We push stuff out, and thank goodness we have some extra help in the way of a highly professional volunteer. But we push stuff out not quite every day, but multiple times a week on things that are going out. So it's going to be big. There's no other way to say it.
Understood. Ms. Kancianik.
Yeah, as you were describing that, I was thinking, could some of that, now obviously not communications from your office and stuff, but could some of that technology be rolled into a class somehow? Like, could students take on some of those responsibility with a
Yeah.
teacher overseeing it, obviously?
Actually, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Anything else with regard to the question?
No, go ahead.
Yes. So we actually employed someone who graduated from that class. The issue is that is a learning environment, and this is a work environment. So where, just as an example, let's say that there's a bunch of people getting on a bus to go to Harrisburg, and someone asks the superintendent for, some giveaways, to be able to say, "Hey, Senator, hey, Representative, here's a little something about Pottstown." In the old days, I couldn't do that. Or if I was doing it, I was doing it at, 11 o'clock at night after, the day is done, to the best of my ability. But so to answer your question, I they might be able to help a little, but I don't. That probably wouldn't be a practical spot, because they're learning, our high school kids, which do a great job and interview me on a regular basis. They're doing great stuff, but they're not going to be able to manage our TV system that rolls at our middle school and our high school. They're not going to be able to be free during the school day because they'll be in classes. It's a great idea though.
So you don't see anything they could do, like social media wise, or I mean, and I don't know the answer. I'm just throwing it out there.
For
'Cause
example,
we already have classes that kind of work, like the automobile department, cooking, like they do services and learn. So I just feel like there might be something.
Yeah, there might
create
be some-
content.
Huh?
Like creating content is what I'm seeing. Like that would not managing it maybe, but
Yeah, there could be something to explore there, especially at the high school level. Like obviously they probably wouldn't be much help district-wide, but at the high school, I think there could be, yeah.
Can we get the culinary arts students to, feed all the students? I wish.
At the traditional career and tech institutes where they're coming in and out, the culinary students do get to do some of that within their curriculum. Yeah.
very short tangent. My grandmother will tell me stories about being in home ec in high school, and that was a big part of what they did. Was they did lunch for the kids every day. I know we're not doing that, but I just get days gone by right there. Anyway, so that answers that question. skipping some of the other stuff, maybe to still come up for future conversations about to speak about some of the process behind the budget as it is. I will stick those questions on a shelf. Advocacy and legislative updates. One thing I wanted to note, I took my hand down in the other meeting because I knew I had already talked a lot, but there was a concern raised about all of the potential ways that we might lose funding, not get funding from the federal government, which is obviously a very real concern. The issue of vouchers at the state level was raised. The Senate did reintroduce a bill. I think right now it's called PASS. The Senate did reintroduce a bill. I believe it passed the committee. I do not believe, not only do I not believe it would pass the House, but I also just wanted to note that that voucher program, should it pass, is not funded by the individual school districts. It is funded by the state. So it would not come directly out of our pocket. Now, I don't want to make it sound like it's not a problem. It's a total problem. The state owes us money that they are not giving us right now. And I do not want to see the state send money to private schools. Like, I am vehemently opposed to the idea. But I did want to note that should it pass, it is not going to have a direct impact on our budget, at least not in the short term. Mr. Rodriguez, I see your hand up. You have thoughts about this?
I would like, I felt this would be the most appropriate way. I would like to remind committee members that back in 1997, there was a piece of legislation that was started the same way. You don't have to worry, school districts. You will not have to pay for it. We will pay for it out of the state budget. That legislation is what we call charters. So, fool me once, shame on me. Wait, you know what I
Shame
mean.
on you. You know, yes. Point taken. Okay, so I wanted to note that. Also, May 13th is Advocacy Day. It's PSBA Day. It's the PA Schools Works Day. It is all of the advocacy stuff rolled up right now. It somehow got scheduled on the same day. I certainly strongly encourage everyone to show up. I know, Mr. Rodriguez, you were just there this week, and I think you'll be back, right? You're going to go back again this coming week.
Yep.
That advocacy is so very important. And especially when you get to meet with folks who aren't necessarily already, like, you know, the cheerleaders, the ones introducing the bills, but being able to get in front of some people who need to hear the Pottstown story. They need to hear what's going on with how these things affect us, and how not only in the negative, but how when we have what we need, it affects us positively. So just wanted to encourage that. Mr. Amato, I see you're here and your mute is off. Do you have something you might want to say?
Here, yes, I do have something I want to say, but I was not speaking because I'm not a member of this committee.
Okay, so here you're always welcome to speak as the Director of Community Relations. That is my open invitation, always. Jump in.
Thank you. So we spend a lot of time talking about the importance of telling the Pottstown story. And that's telling that story both internally and externally, so that people understand what's happening in our school districts, can not only understand it, but hopefully support what we are doing. And so we do have a number of ways of doing that, but I will say that, and as Mr. Rodriguez pointed out, as we talk specifically about the communications person, when there's only one person, it's kind of obvious who we're talking about. So, however, I will say this. First, in terms of what we have talked about before in this district about return on investment. Well, here's a great return on investment, because that individual was a graduate of Pottstown High School, was in the program that involved media, and has, since he has come on board, provided, I think, invaluable service to us, particularly as it relates to video. And you have to know where your strong points are. And one of our strong points in communications is our superintendent's ability to use video to communicate to internal and external audiences. And when you look at video and you look at what it takes to produce a video, quite honestly, when you get into the production room where this young man goes, 1 minute of airtime generally equates to about 60 minutes of production time, because it just doesn't happen by magic. So I would be obviously strongly advocating for us taking a second look at that position. One of the other pieces, true, I think, are at the building level. Our building level administrators are doing a much better job than they have in the past of using some social media platforms, but that still does not take us to where we need to be. And quite honestly, on many days, and today included, where I might have 3 places to be and try to be in those 3 places at the same time to provide some type of media support. The individual that we're talking about also has 3 places. So in terms of being boots on the ground and providing those services every day, I think it is a valuable position to help tell our story. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on anything we've been talking about?
I mean, I will just say it's a good thing not everybody we have to talk about is like right here with us. It's very it's just not, it doesn't feel great.
Yeah. Not only not here with us, but this meeting doesn't get sent out unless that person is back in the stage doing the job right now. This doesn't happen unless he's not there. Thank you.
I agree.
And I should just note, I referenced that Mr. Amato is the Community Relations Director. It might be important for me to note this, just in case anybody gets the wrong idea. He's the volunteer community relations director. You cannot be a staff member and on the board at the same time, just in case there's any confusion about that. Hope that's okay for me to point out. Okay, I think we've covered everything. Oh, I just wanted to say, this goes back to finance and facilities at the very end. As far as treasurer goes, I'm happy to stay on as treasurer if that is what the board so chooses. I just figured I should mention that in case that needed to be mentioned.
It did, because when you were silent, I thought that you didn't want it anymore.
Want isn't maybe the word I use. It's not always, I don't know, whatever. I don't have to go into that.
It's hard.
So that would be this meeting coming up, right? The committee of the whole, we would be nominating and voting on that, right?
I believe so, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I do get insight in that job. I value the role, but I sign a lot of bills. Okay, so anyway, I think that's it for tonight. Is there any other public comment?
Not at this time, Mrs. Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then I will adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting is, what would that be? June 12th? Yes, June 12th. And I'll see you all there. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.